Hello and welcome back to Redefined Parenting. I am your host, Veenu Keller. I want to welcome you to Zingo TV, channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both Zingo TV app on the respective app stores and iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on I can't even talk today. Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Today, I have an amazing guest. And I know I say that all the time, but this guest is really, really amazing because not only has she been my mentor, but she's been my coach for a couple years now. And she's really helped me to understand my parenting even at a deeper level. And so I wanted to bring her on today because I wanted to have this discussion. One of the things that she's helped me understand is how to get back into my center. And when things are in disarray with my kids and, we're feeling unbalanced, like a lot of us parents, sometimes we get in this unbalance of life. And so one of the things my coach has helped me to realize is there's always a center you can get back into. So I've asked her, instead of me giving you all the greatness of her wisdom, I've asked her to actually come onto the show and really just dive deep into this and help all my listeners out there realize that imbalance happens when we're parenting, but there is a center we can get back into. So without further ado, Linda, welcome to our show.
Thanks, Veenu. Very excited to be here today. I have a weird accent. I live in Australia, based on the Sunshine Coast and the beautiful hinterland here. It's a great topic today, actually, bringing yourself back to center with the parenting role, particularly. I'm not a parenting coach. I'm more a coach who helps people to create any desired outcomes in their life, whatever is big for them. But I am qualified in that I am a parent. I have 3 children, and I ranging from 30 now to about to turn 25, which sounds really weird, and 2 stepchildren, 16 and 13. I've had lots of experience as a parent and also a single parent. I was a single parent for quite a long time as well. So I know what it's like to be knocked off your center and to have the impact of that. And then also with the tools and the training that you and I have, how to come back to a center no matter what's going on, which is super cool. Yeah.
Right. And what I love about it is that you and I have shared that, both being single parents, having adult kids, having stepkids, and there's different, alignments that come with different phases of our life and different parenting. And, unlike me, you didn't get a chance to redo. I thank God to give me my redos that are 10. And yet, and I mean that true and from my heart, because it's because I have the 10-year-olds that I've realized some of the imbalances, I say, where I get frustrated, I let my emotions take over. I'm reactive, right? I'm in those reactive emotions. Last week's show, I had another guest on and we talked about the reactive emotions that us parents have. And we're trying to change our kids instead of really focusing on what's showing up for us. Mm. And so it's great to have you on today, because I think it's really going to link into that of, when we have everything going on in our life with our work and the different challenges that come up, and we're pretty much all over the map. And then all of a sudden something happens with our kids. And, we just want instant results. Like, wait, I told you to do this. I don't understand why you're not. And then our emotions start to explode all over the place. And I can tell you as a parent, and I'm sure you felt this too as a parent, sometimes we just don't feel good at the end of the day about how we handle things with our kids.
Yeah, definitely.
I definitely say I'm out of center.
Yeah, at times. And then it puts us out of center in a different way, because it's not a reactive thing. It's more of a reflective thing. But now we're beating ourselves up because I should have done better. I could have done better. And I didn't live up to a standard that I hold myself to. And because there's a mismatch there, we've got a new set of tension. And then, however we think that's going to help us. It usually doesn't, by the way, but we sort of hold that structure in place. It's like, well, I'll make myself be a better parent tomorrow, or next week, or whenever I'm feeling better, rather than actually creating an end result in terms of the bigger picture of things, which really is the crux of our work, and how we can really bring about major change. And also it becomes our beacon for creating our center, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, very, very soon with that. So I didn't get to do a redo, but I'm very grateful I didn't do a redo. But I have, we've created a whole beautiful scenario where Craig very much is, he is the father figure to my adult children, which sounds a little weird, but really they love him like their dad. And it's a very different dynamic, but both of us work on holding our center in relation to all of our kids. And as adult children still present different challenges. It's just they're growing up, we have the illusion that once they're out of the house, or once they're 20 or something, I won't have to worry about it anymore. They'll be off doing their own thing like I was. But then it doesn't quite necessarily work out that way.
No, it doesn't. And, like you, my husband, Brian, has been definitely the father figure for my older boys too, who are 29 and 24, and holding that space for them as well. So let's just dive into this. So to help people understand, one of the things that you helped me understand a couple of years ago when I kept coming up with some of these challenges, and I was like, well, but I could help everybody else, and I could see everybody else's end result and how to help them. And so what's lacking with my own? And one of the things you asked me is like, what's the end result that I want? Like, what am I really going for when it comes to parenting? And one of the words that we both started to work on is, how do I parent for my greatness? Mm-hmm. Like, that's really about it, like parenting for my greatness. And so that was my end result, to figure out, like, what is that going to look like when I parent for my greatness? And holding that tension to realizing that that's truly what I want. And so how do we, so for the listeners out there, how could we support them in really understanding that first we have to come up with that? Like, what's the end result, like you were saying?
Yeah. So really the first thing about that is to realize that what you think parenting from greatness is probably not what parenting from greatness is. So, because what we think is things like, well, I'll know I'm parenting from greatness because my children are well behaved, or, everything falls together really easily and we're out the door in time for getting on the school bus, or getting, to whatever it happens to be. That's the evidence that I'm looking for. I'll know that, and there's complete tranquility in the house, and there's, all these weird standard of measurements that we come up with, that we then go, well, then I must be parenting from greatness. But that's actually not what it's about. It's about creating a focus of, what's the big thing? Like, why on earth did you come here to be a parent? What did you come here to impart to the generation below you, the ones that are coming through you and living with you, and however you choose to see it? I like to think my kids chose me as their parent. I know that for some people that sounds a little weird, but I like saying that. I also like saying it when they try and blame me for something. It's like, yeah, but you chose me. So it sort of becomes handy. But really, to be serious, if we can come back to a point of going, okay, so what is it that I'd love to create in relationship with my children and these beautiful souls that have come through me and to have joined me in this creation? So that's the first thing, is what am I creating? I'm creating a relationship primarily, aren't I, to begin with? I'm creating connection with beings that, I really want to see them flourish in the world. I've got a vested interest in it, to see that there's a creation that together we actually bring forward something bigger in this world, and not because they have to, there's no obligation, but just to be part of that creation. We're creating like we would for art, which sounds again a little weird, but we're creating for art's sake. We're creating for creation's sake. We're creating for the joy of the experience of the bigness of that. And so rather than looking at problem solving, like better behaved kids, more organized, or this, that, and the other, if our bigger vision is to create that, then that reframes where we come from with everything. So if the kids are mucking around and they're supposed to be getting ready for school, we could jump into the control and the manipulation to shore up how it looks like right now, or we could orientate, how am I trying to create my end result in the greatness, the bigger picture of things. And if I'm in that, then how does that parent behave? How does that parent, where do they come from? And they have to come from a center. They have to come from that point where the original point of creation came from. It can't come from a management and outside control scenario, because in a way, you'll notice, and this is an epiphany moment. I'll just come back to when I was a single parent. I'd probably think I'd only been a year or so single parenting, and the kids were mucking around getting ready for school, and I had a very tight timeline. I actually had a day off, which was really super cool. So I was going to drive them to school, and I had a few appointments lined up to do some self-care and everything, and I was feeling a little indulgent. At the same time, they're mucking around, they're running late. The lunches aren't in their lunch boxes. They're not dressed. Someone's lost a shoe. Someone else has decided to have a fight with a teddy bear and whack someone else over the head. And all this stuff's going on. And I just felt the rage. I felt the tension. I felt everything coming up in my body. And next thing, I am down in their wing of the house and I'm yelling. And I'm slamming doors, and I am just going like a banshee at these three kids, right? And they're only like 6, 9, and 12, I think, at that stage, or not even that. Actually, it'd be younger than that. Anyway, young kids. I'm carrying on like a banshee, and in the back of my mind, this voice somehow got through that said, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing? You are just carrying on like a 2-bob watch right now." So I'm observing myself and I'm still doing this thing. And at that moment I went, there's two of me in here. There's this raving lunatic trying to get something to happen. And then there's this calm, like, what on earth are you doing? Part of me. So I had this awareness of the two. And I still continued to rant and rave until I finished that, because I felt like I'd started something I needed to finish. So I did that, right? But next time it came up, it was a little bit more like there was a pause. There was like, oh, I actually have a choice right now. Do I need to go into the rant, raving, lunatic mother, or can I actually just stop for a moment and actually tune into the other side? And I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea about these sorts of things. But in those moments, I gave myself a chance to stop and to just take a little bit of a breath or take a bit of notice. I'm like, okay, there is another part. There is another option. I don't have to do this. And what it did is it freed me up to question what I was really going for. Because in that moment, I was trying to look like the good mum who had all of her stuff together, who got the kids to school on time, who wasn't late, who they actually had the right shoes on. They were wearing the right shirt for the day. They were doing, they had their lunch. All these things, I was trying to make it look like I had my stuff together. And that was the most important thing to my egoic side. Whereas my greatness was like, if I ask that side of me in those moments, it's like, I don't care if they wear a pink tutu to school as long as they get there. And even if it's 15 minutes late, it doesn't matter. No one's going to die because we're a little bit late. So I started to become aware of this other side, and that there is a point that feels a lot more centered than the one that's really trying to manage and create an illusion of something. Now, in reality, what was going on? Well, I was trying to negotiate what life is like, running a business, running a household, being a single mum, having no support. I spent my weekends on a ride-on mower because we had acreage to take care of and things like that. Things that just sort of, I found myself in a life situation. Of course I was stressed. But there was still the option of the centering that was available to me, rather than the raving banshee trying to look like she had her stuff together.
You said something that was really important, I think, is that we have that egoic state. And I think a lot of us spend time as a parent because we want to know we're the right parent. We want to know we're a good parent. We want to know we're a great parent. We don't want to know that we're failing as a parent. And I feel like we're always trying to escape being a failure as a parent. That puts us in that egoic state, like you said, to look like we have our stuff together and we're organized and our kids look all put together, and it's so funny you say that, because I remember one of our coaching sessions, a couple of years ago, and I was like, and she was wearing this to school, and I was like, oh my gosh, and her hair was like this, and it made her look like a banshee off the street. And you're like, did she make it to school on time? Yes. And you just asked me, you're like, okay, and so what were you going for her to get to school on time? Okay, she was. So who cares what she was wearing? And it was in that moment I realized I was up against that egoic of what is other people going to think about me? What story are they going to create about my parenting? And oh my gosh, if she's a parenting coach, look at her own kid. And it really was all ego. It had nothing to do with looking at, you know, if I really wanted a great morning, what would look like is a nice and peaceful, calming feeling that my daughter's going to school with. Forget what she's wearing, that she is settled for her day, to concentrate more on what is her day going to look like versus my mom is upset because I'm looking like this. My mom already said my hair looks like a banshee. Oh my gosh. Like, instead of creating that roughness because of my ego, instead of asking my creator, like, am I genius? What would I've wanted for that moment? What was more important in that moment? Which literally changed the whole trajectory now. And this has been over 2 years now. So now, and you'll probably like this, I let her mismatch. I let her wear the wrinkled clothes, like, because that's not important now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not. I check back into, like you said, like, what is my genius wanting? Like, what am I truly wanting in this moment, in this morning, for the rest of the day? Like, you got the whole day. Like, this is just a moment that we're focused on, and I'm making it about what other people think.
Absolutely. And it's so big and it has so much gravity right now. And when you go to that higher place, when I was talking before about what's your vision as a parent, like, think about in 20 years time, what's the vision for that? What have you created with that child? And for me, those moments where they go together, you go to school looking like a clown, it's like, that was hilarious. Like, we look back on it and we laugh. In the moment, it's like, no, what does it mean about me? What does it mean? What are people going to think? What's the who cares? Like, seriously, if it doesn't align with the bigger vision of everything, any of that tension that we think has all the gravity and all the importance actually has none. It really doesn't.
Right. Yeah. So when we get to this point, for people that really aren't familiar, that we do have two different orientations going on in us, right? So you and I, we do the work, so we understand this. But for people that don't, like, they wake up and they have this expectation of what their morning's supposed to look like. The minute that it goes in disarray, how do we support the listeners out there to really understand how to change that, how to get back into center? What does that even mean, to be back into your center?
Well, I think the first thing to realize is that when we feel things are going into disarray, and when we're sort of becoming aware of that, it's almost like the cat's already been let out of the bag. Like, the horse has already bolted. I'll use all the cliches. Like, when we're aware of a sense of, I've got to do something about this, something's already happened. So what really happens for us when something comes up, we actually feel something in our body first. There'll be tension, whether it's, I'm starting to feel angry, I'll start to feel powerless, I start to feel hopeless, whatever it is, you'll feel something in your body. And if you can start to recognize that earlier and earlier, you can start to then question, what are you making it mean about this moment? What are you defining as happening in this moment? What meaning are you assigning? And, is there anything to do about it? And if that's the case, well, then you might find something to do about it. But if you can sort of nip it in the bud quicker than later, then of course it doesn't get a chance to sort of build the momentum that me being the screaming banshee at the kids while they were throwing teddies and things, that had already long gone. Like, I probably should have tapped into that an hour before. I'm feeling tense today. Let me address that. And it was primarily probably because of my tension around other things that were going on in my life, not even about what the kids were doing. And as we know, kids tend to respond to energy. They're a little bit like animals. If the dog knows when you're upset, the cat understands. Everything gets it, right? The kids do pick up on as well. So if you're in a bit of a tiz and you're putting that sort of energy out there, they're going to start behaving in accordance with that energy. So we take responsibility for ourselves first of all. So where am I at with things? Just every now and again, just checking in on the barometer of what's coming up. Am I, where am I on the scale of things? And if I'm feeling some tension coming up, then just by looking at where I'm assigning meaning can actually depower it almost straight away. A lot of the time when we're actually going, actually, I'm really nervous about such and such that's coming up, or I've got to have a meeting with my tax accountant next week. And it's really, I know I've got to do some things before that. And it's really starting to feel a little overwhelming. So we can start to then take some of the power out of what we think is the circumstance, rather than waiting till it all gets unraveled, and then we're trying to claw it back, and we're trying to blame everything and everybody else. And of course, the kids are right there, and they kids are doing what kids do. So it's really easy to point a finger and say, it's your fault that I feel like this. And so now I need to change you from doing that so I can feel better. And then all of a sudden we end up in this exchange, because the kids then trying to assess where they're at with things, and how they're in trouble, or how they can rectify it, and all that sort of thing. And they may become, they may straight away do what you say, or they might rebel against it, because where we put in some force will often meet resistance in some way. So there's all sorts of ways that can play out, but it's actually, we're addressing a problem that wasn't the cause of the problem. We're addressing a symptom of the problem, if you like.
Absolutely. And one of the things I love that you just said and you mentioned is like, where are we putting the power? And that's honestly like one of the questions that I ask myself on a constant basis, especially when I have any conflict. Like, let's just put the whole parenting aside. When I have any conflict going on in my life where there's the tension that does not feel comfortable, because it's angst, it's pure conflict. I have to ask myself, like, where am I putting the power? And generally I'm putting the power into judgment. I'm putting the power into an expectation that's really not realistic anyway, And so going back to what you're saying is like, where are we putting the power? We're not even putting it into parenting from our greatness, when, like you said, first define what that looks like, but that outcome that we want overall, who do we want to be for our kids? And it's funny because I'm starting to see this more and more now, probably because I'm more aware and my eyes are wide open, is how much the reflection of who I am shows up in my children. I realize, I'm like, oh gosh, like that is so, oh God, oh yeah, oh that is so me. Oh, and especially it was so funny because I was like driving with the twins the other day, and my daughter said something, and my son mocked her. And I said, "Oh, that's not nice." He's like, "I mean, you do it." And I was like, "Ooh, ooh, do I? Me? I do that?" And in that moment, like, I realized I think I do that. I mean, obviously I do that, or he wouldn't be doing anything. Well, you do it, sir. And it took that to really hit me in the face, to say that is definitely not parenting from my genius at all. And what point am I making, and where am I putting the power again? And how much our kids soak up just being around us. And then the minute that they do it, it's a reflection that we get to see, and we're like, oh, that does not look pretty at all. Not good.
Yeah, look, it's interesting though, because then we're going into a, almost like the right-wrong scenario with things.
Yeah.
And it's like, what parts of myself can't be expressed in the world, and that sort of thing. Is it human to judge and mock? Yes, it is. Okay, do we do it? Yes, we do. Do we make it wrong? Yes, we do. And is it nice to be subject to that? No, it's not. Okay, so that's cool to acknowledge, but it is still part of our humanness and part of who we are. So we don't necessarily need to, because as soon as we look at it and go, oh, that's wrong, I'll need to control that. Guess what? We've shifted our power into that too. So if we just go, okay, so as our kids beautifully do, they do a couple of things really well, is that they do mirror some of our shadow side. We look at it and we go, oh, wow, there's some of my dark side that I don't really want anybody else to know about. Right. And then we go, okay, well, you can't have that either. And then that becomes, it can become part of their shadow side. I'm not allowed to be like this is wrong, and all those sorts of things. And that's a whole other conversation, basically. But the other thing they're really good at doing is pushing our buttons, because, they live with you, they observe you, they look at you, they know they see your values, and they're making their own observations in the world as to whether they want to adopt those values, or they actually want to reject those values and create a new value based on what we call a void. So it's like, oh, mum cared for everybody and she worked her fingers to the bone and she was so stressed out. I'm not doing that. So my value now becomes about making sure that I'm looked after first, and then I'll, if there's anything left over, I'll look after everybody else, which might sound selfish, but it's like, we're all doing it. We're all using different things that we're observing growing up, and we're adopting values, or we're rejecting them and based on and calling that a void. Well, we don't actually do that consciously, but we have a void, and then we create a new value for ourselves based on that. And then, of course, when we do that, either way, we, as parents, we're looking at that and going, oh, yeah, right, okay. That's not what I would do, or that's not, and we can make it wrong. We can try and go into controlling and say, that's not what I would do. That's not in alignment with my values, or that's not the right thing to do, thinking that's our job, is to teach them to be a clone of us, but it's not.
Right. And it's funny because you're right. It's not right or wrong. However, it also shows that what has shown up to us that we don't even realize that we're doing, and can be perceived as not making someone feel good. I mean, it wouldn't, and I had our mentor William Whitecloud on here, a couple months ago, and we did talk about the good and the bad, the shadows that bubble up to the top that we have to suppress because we've been punished for it for so long, but it still exists, and it still shows its face because it needs to, like, it's a part of us that needs to. So, do you feel that part of that also, when that's happening and we're judging ourselves of what's right and wrong, how that also is taking us off balance and taking us also out of our center?
Yeah, definitely. Because the only we're talking about the two parts of us. The part of us that's about the managing, the controlling, the I'm feeling tension, I've got to fix this issue, is the part that's assessing that. It's actually, if you go into that other side of you, that little voice in the back of your head of what are you doing, he actually has no judgment about it, right? That's your greatness side of things. That's your sense of center. And actually from there, when you live in that for a while, you start to learn that everything's allowed. It's okay to and therefore we're not actually putting power into things that are highly dysfunctional. So let's say, I'm just coming up with a valid example for this. So let's say that we make it really wrong that your son steals your daughter's sandwich, right? She's got a sandwich and he steals it, and you're like, right, well, and she's upset, and it's like, and then it's like, you can't steal, stealing's bad, and all this sort of stuff, and then his desires then have to be put on the back burner, rather than showing him functionally he can have what he wants. It's just best not to take it from someone else, because that has a bit of a negative consequence on someone else's experience and that sort of thing. But if we put all the power in what he did in order to fulfill his desire, is you became a thief, and they start to identify with certain concepts like that, then we're powering that up, and they're potentially then going to become more and more dysfunctional with their relationship to that. Now, either most people will do one of two things. They will either go, I'm never going to do that again. I never want to be identified like that. And I think that's what a lot of our manipulative type of techniques are trying to do, is to have the child adopt I tried that once and it didn't work and I never want to do that again. But that doesn't always work, because it usually takes a pretty big threat for them to actually go to that level of immediately rejecting something as, oh, that's so bad, I'm never going to do that again. Or that they adopt it as a strategy and just go, well, that's what's wrong with me, that's what's bad about me. And it becomes a sort of a shadow habit, and something that we just, we indulge in really weird and dysfunctional ways. Like, all of a sudden, instead of just stealing a sandwich because he wanted a sandwich to fulfill a desire, that was his end result. All of a sudden, it's like the thrill now goes into the taking of something of somebody else's. The next thing, he steals his mate's pen, or he's, taking money out of your wallet, or, whatever, because like now he's got the thrill of the game, right? And it's got nothing to do with what he really wanted to fulfill his desire. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah,
so we're getting deep here, but and it's a little bit off topic, but when we're parenting from greatness, it's just also important to know that everything's valid, but just look at it from the bigger picture. Did he steal a sandwich to be annoying? No, because he had, not necessarily, he might be. But would it be worth having a conversation about why did you do that? What was your desire? What were you really going for? Were you actually still hungry? Because we could have just made another sandwich. You could have a whole one of your own,
Right.
that sort of thing.
Emotions of stealing and then creating, like you said, I mean, it creates a different outcome now from the
Yeah.
just wanting a sandwich. It creates the outcome of the thrill, if you would, the adrenaline rush. Like, can I get away with it? What, it becomes a game almost.
Yeah, that's right. And we think that we've done our job as the parent just by saying that's the wrong thing to do. Don't do that again. And as I said, you're either going to have them go, oh, yeah, I'm definitely never doing that. Or, oh, actually, there was something about that was cool.
Right.
Rather than going, you went for something because you had an end result. You had something you wanted. What was that? Like in that moment, what was it you really wanted, rather than because you really didn't want to steal your sister's sandwich? It can be a great time to have them orientating into their greatness and to what's true for them. And that's another thing that we forget. We forget our kids have greatness. Our kids have gifts, talents, true nature. They've got a purpose. And we forget that, and we just look at their behavior and we think that's the kid. That's the kid. We say, oh, they're just that type of kid. They do this. They misbehave. They never listen to me. Blah blah blah. But under all that veneer, there's a greatness. There's something. If your greatness looks at their greatness, there's a whole new relationship there, and much closer to that bigger picture that we were talking about at the beginning.
Right. And it's funny that you say that, because this is one of the things that I've coached families over for a long time, because, I get these clients where the parents come in, it's like, my kid's so difficult. They're having all these challenges at school. I don't know what to do. And then they come home and they don't listen. It's like, my kid's just bad. Like, how do I make them good? And I said, well, first of all, let's just see them as good. Let's just see them as good. If we, and like, another one of my coaches always said, change what you see and what you see will change. And so you're always going to see them in this light, and you're always going to see them bad. That's all you're ever going to see them. You're never going to be able to see their greatness, because it's so filtered with the bad, because we've already labeled it bad. Instead of just labeling it, it's a behavior for an end result that they're trying to fulfill in their life. And again, just like the whole stealing scenario, has their behavior turned into a game for them, because the thrill of what they really were going for when this behavior first was created, maybe it was just to be heard, maybe it was just to get a question answered in school, and the teacher was not seeing him, and so he created a ruckus to be seen, to get help, because that was really what he wanted and desired to have. And then all of a sudden he had some type of secondary gain out of it, and realized, like, oh, look, I could be seen all the time this way. Like, this is going to be fun. Right. Yeah. And now it's become a pattern and a game to him to have that type of behavior that has been, labeled bad or whatever. So it's teaching these parents and even teachers. Like, I mean, I think teachers could really benefit from all of this too, is like, how do we see our kids through their own greatness? How does our greatness see their greatness? And I think also when we get to that point, that's really where I feel centered. When I give myself a moment to really appreciate the gift or the greatness in my child, knowing that their intent is not to give me any more gray hair. That's not their intent. I really want to believe that. It gives me a moment to get back to, it's like my soul seeing their soul, if you would. Which is pure. There's no good or bad in a soul. It's just our souls.
Yeah, that's right. We're all here to be contributing to the expansion of the universe in our unique ways. So, and that's all we're doing from our greatness perspective. And it's really interesting, because we see the personality and the identity of somebody, and we think that's them. We how many times do you look at someone that and you go, oh, they're like this, or they do this, or they're a gossip, or they're they just never follow through on anything, or they all these things, but really it's the veneer over the big center. And I used the analogy the other day. I said to someone, I said, do you eat M&Ms? She said, no. I said, but do you know an M&M? She said, yes. I said, and you know how they've got all these different colors? She says, yeah. And I said, well, how deep does the color go when you look at it? And she goes, not very deep, right? It's like a micro thin layer. And then there's the covering thing, which I think is all white. And then there's chocolate in the middle, right? Right. And you can imagine that most of you is the non-colored part, the chocolate and the covering. And then the color is actually the bit that everybody sees and everyone's excited about. So I really like the red M&Ms. I don't like the brown ones, or I don't like the green ones, or whatever it happens to be. But actually we've got these centers in the middle, which we're not all exactly the same, but we do have, certain attributes of us, such as our true nature and purpose and our greatness, and our kids have that too. So if we can look past the veneer, and the veneer is constructed by their habitual behaviors, and it only becomes a habit because they're getting a reward from something. There's some sort of a reward that they've got out of doing it. Otherwise, it's just what we call an incident. Like if a child, let's say, for example, well, say they stole a sandwich, but they've never done it again, not because they're scared, but just because they decided it wasn't their experience. That's what we would call an incident. Right. Whereas if they continually steal everybody's sandwiches, then it becomes a behavior. It's a habitual incident. It's happened over and over again. But why are they doing it? As you said, because there's a reward. As you were saying, if they're making a ruckus in the classroom regularly, it's because finally they get some attention in class that they weren't getting through, say, achievement or accolades or recognition, or, because they may have the limiting belief of I'm insignificant and everything, just like with every time they put their hand up, they're never seen, they're never called on, those sorts of things. So they worked out that in the behavior of a ruckus, I got attention. And then they do it again and they get more attention, and so on. So it becomes a behavior. And then we see that kid as a disruptive kid. And then we completely bypass the fact that they have greatness, that they have this center, they have a sole purpose, that they have desires that are actually true for them, well beyond just having the attention that they're craving on that level.
I love that analogy to an M&M. It's so good. And again, an M&M is judged by its color, because let's be honest, it doesn't matter what color M&M you get, they all taste the same.
Yeah, I haven't had any for ages, so I'll have to test that theory. But
hold yourself and put every color M&M and ask yourself, how do you know which color is which? You don't, because they all taste the same.
Right. Yeah.
But yet we're so willing to judge our children by a behavior. They are not the behavior.
No.
Your kid is not the behavior. Their identity is not the behavior. It's not even based on the behavior. And when we talk about how, if we can come as parents back to our center, how much better are we prepared to start lifting our kids' self-worth and self-esteem? Because this is where we're in big deficit. I mean, seriously, this is where I am finding as a parent-child coach that our kids have such low self-worth and self-esteem. And, and parents don't know how to help that. Like, how do I build that up? And one of the first things that I teach parents is get back into your center.
Yeah.
See your kid for their greatness. See your kid as they're amazing. What do you see differently? And then all of a sudden the behaviors turn away. Like there's no more behaviors when you ask that question.
Yeah. I think also that the thing really to remember in that, because that's very true. It's such a powerful structure. And the thing to remember with that is that also, in order to come back to your center, you have to remember your own greatness. You have to remember that you have greatness too, because you can't be in a centered state denying the fact that you have greatness, that you've got a true nature and a purpose. And then when we start to come back to that, if you're really aware of it, what you'll start to notice is that you'll start to be aware of and to follow your own heart's desires. And when you do that, the thing that becomes obvious is that the more you invest in energy and attention and action into those things that are true for you, like say, for example, you used to love to paint, then you had kids and you gave up painting, right? You don't do that anymore. And then you start to recognize, I've got a center, I've got greatness. Actually, I just, what I really feel like I'd love to do is to connect back with some painting, and you start painting, right? And you're starting to really connect with that true part of you, and that it gives you then another means to come back to your center. Now, that's one thing. That allows you to sort of strengthen that muscle of being in your center using a hobby or something you absolutely love. It could be skydiving, if that's what you loved. It could be adventuring on hikes. It could be, whatever it is that is true for you. It's actually really important that you bring that back into your world to help you to strengthen your connection with your own center. But the next side effect of that also, and there are many, but in terms of being a parent and having children, is what do they get out of that? When they see mum or dad indulging in something that they absolutely love, painting. And I use the word indulging in a bit of a weird way, and you'll see in a moment why. But mum's painting, dad's out in the shed doing some woodwork, and it's something he used to love to do. Or mum's out doing speaking from stages and expressing herself, or dad's singing, or whatever it is. What do the kids get out of that? What do they notice? They notice that it's actually important to live from your heart and to live from your center. And they start to look for where their fulfillment comes from. Not how do I get attention so that I don't feel insignificant, but actually the way for me to come back to who I really am is to find what's true for me. What do I love? And next thing, the kids are painting and or whatever it is that's true for them. And I've always found that in my house, and that and it continues to happen. In fact, a memory popped up on Facebook the other day. Me and my now 30-year-old son, about 4 or 5 years ago, we used to have watercolor paint nights, and we set a challenge for each other. And he might say, let's do a challenge of watercolor paint a flaming donut, right? And it'd be something weird. He'd just come up with something bizarre, or I would come up with something. And we would just, for that night, we would sit there and we would paint, and we'd be around the table with all the colors and chatting and just being in that center. But that came about because I was going into my art. And then that brought his art out. And he still connects that with that. And it's one of the key things in his mental health. At 30 years old, if he's feeling a little off center, a bit anxious or something, he knows he can go straight back to his art and he'll be back in his center. That's a tool for him for life. My daughter does exactly the same thing. She's living with us at the moment, and whenever she's off center, she's got this beautiful artwork that she's got coming through her and all that sort of thing. But again, it's because she grew up with that. She watched what happened when I became more connected with the things that were true for me. We all go hiking, the whole family. When something, it's like, yeah, let's go hiking. And then again, it's another thing we can fall back on when we want to find our center. Get out in nature, get in the fresh air, move the body, feeling amazing. So there is a very big side effect there. It's not just about you being in your center and flexing that muscle, but it's the tools that you're giving your children for the rest of their lives that then they can observe and go, actually, rather than working my ass off and trying to pay the bills and take care of all my circumstances, the first thing that's most important is to be in alignment and in relationship with my own center and what's true for my heart and my heart's desires. And rather than seeing that as selfish, seeing that as actually it's selfless, because I can't give from a point of I'm anxious or I've got things that have to be done and there's demands on me and I'm feeling tension and I'm now emotionally reactive to the world. So, yeah.
I love that. And I think that's a great opportunity and a tool strategy that you just shared with our listeners is, what brings you back to your center? I know, like with my husband, he loves to walk barefoot, like outside. I cannot stand it. I used to tell my kids all the time, don't forget your shoes. And he'd be the one like, don't forget to take your shoes off. A little bit of a challenge there, and because that really grounds him, like walking. And I personally do not like the feel of grass on the bottom of my feet. I don't like it. I've never liked it. So I definitely need shoes. Just even thinking about it gives me the heebie-jeebies, grass barefoot. And yet to watch my husband, like all the time, just walk barefoot in the grass, and he just loves it. And my kids love it. And when you're talking about like the artwork, I know for my daughter, who is, definitely my mirror all the time and my biggest challenge, that's her when she is doing art or creating or making like her bracelets or painting or, getting material and just cutting it up and making Barbie clothes out of tying knots and this and that. She is so calm. She is so in her center. It's almost like a different being. And you can just see that. Like, even when I walk into her room, the whole energy in her room is different, when she is doing that. And I didn't even realize it until you just said that. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's her getting grounded. It's her getting back into her center in that moment, And so I was just thinking, like, for all our listeners out there, if you just take a moment, like, what activity do you have to get back into your center? Some of you may be meditating, and that's a great way to get back into your center. But some people don't meditate. I'm not big on meditating. And so it's just realizing, like, what is it that gets you back into center? For me, there's like certain music I listen to in that moment. it just puts me back. It calms my mind. It calms my brain. It allows me to literally just be within myself, just listening to music, So it's interesting that you said that, because I never even thought about that,
Mm,
just that activity. I have a client that loves to do photography.
mm,
So going out and taking pictures and seeing things through the lens,
yeah.
in a way that other people can't see it, is what she loves to do. So
Mm,
now all of a sudden I'm thinking about, like, oh my gosh, that is so true. We have activities that can really bring us back into our center.
mm, yeah. And the more you flex that muscle, the easier it is to get back to it. When you feel like you're off course again and the emotions are taking over and the circumstances are overwhelming, it's like, oh, actually, I'm more familiar with my center. I can come back to it. And if you struggle, find the activity, go back to the activity or an activity. We've usually got quite a handful of them, actually. When you start to explore, it's usually not just one thing. There'll be other things that you really go, I really love this. This does, and you get the resonance of what it's like to be in connection with something that your heart calls you into, and that sort of thing. And I think the more the better. And I think the more we can, explore those things. I think, and here's just putting it out there, I think that making time, energy, and resources available for the things that we love actually is far more powerful than making sure we take care of all the important things like paying the bills and all that sort of stuff. Those things will get taken care of, because if they don't, the roof goes out from over our head and the food doesn't go on the table and all. So we do make sure they get done, but I think we put way too much emphasis on what's important, and that really knocks us out of our center. It really knocks us away from that, and we think those things are indulgences, and they're not. They're actually the way we're meant to be living most of the time, so that you're not creating a life you have to escape from. You're creating a life that you get up in the morning and you go, awesome, what a great day, here we are. And wouldn't you want your kids to wake up to that each day too? Like, what a great day, rather than, oh, I have to go to school, I've got an obligation. From the age of 5, they've got an obligation to fulfill. And we're in that mode of resigning from our heart and resigning from what's true for us in order to be here. And then the question becomes, well, what's the point? What's the
Right.
point of even being here? We're just going to work really hard until maybe, hopefully, one day we won't be too sick, too old, too broken, too broke to actually have a life that we love when we retire. I mean, that's really screwed up as far as I'm concerned. Every day there's an opportunity for us to be in our center and to explore our heart, and to whatever degree that's available to us, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the even your bank account. If your bank account's empty, believe it or not, you can still find a center point where you can actually come back into something that you really love. I've been out there at times where things haven't been going so well. I've been out in the garden playing with sticks and leaves and just making a little mandala on the ground, and that's like, oh, there's some art expression. I didn't need any materials and that sort of thing. But those are the things that actually start to bring in the wisdom and I guess we'll call it the intuitive guidance to create better options for us. And if your kids can learn that too, how powerful is that? But they're learning through observation more than anything. Don't do what mummy's doing, do what mummy says. Mummy says go and meditate. But if mummy's not meditating, the kids aren't going to meditate. It's like, no,
Right.
mummy's always working hard. Mummy's paying the bills. That's what we need to do. That's what life is about. And its action speaks louder than words, always. And
And
it's true for us too.
yeah, and that's so important. And that's one of the things that, I've learned to come to appreciate more, is that self-care time. It's that I need my kids to see that I'm not living to work, that I'm
Mm,
living to live life, and I'm learning and I'm living to appreciate life. That working allows me to have the freedom of doing what I love to do. And it's not just being behind a computer and constantly doing my work. Because
mm,
it's like you said, I don't want them to think that's what life's about. I don't want my kids to think that you just work, work, work to make money and then you die.
mm,
Like that's what life is. Like I want them to see the beauty in life. And I think one way to do that is, like you said, is like helping them figure out what is their center, what is it that brings them back into the core of who they are and the being that they are, which ties into a lot of the other show, my other TV show that I have with my friend Chuck. We talk a lot about the being versus the doing.
mm,
And
mhm,
there's so much in that And if we could teach it to our kids, I think it comes back to what you and I are talking about today, is finding that center. And you also said something else that was great, is bringing them back into the get to and versus the have to. I have to get up and go to school. I have to work my life away to, you know, think I'm happy because I see my parents do that. What do you get to do? What do
Mm.
you get to wake up to and get to be in your life today?
Mm. Yep, so
So
true.
we have one more minute. Linda, if you could just leave any, last minute, tip or golden nugget to help parents to really take this in about being in their center, what could you tell our listeners?
Well, look, really, the one last thing is that if you observe how powerful things are when you are in your center and how things shift from there, that's the job done. Job done. You observe that, you will see more and more how powerful that is.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Linda, for all your time and being here and sharing your pearls of wisdom. There's so much in there to unpack now. Thank you all for tuning in again. If you're finding value in our show, please check out my Facebook group, Redefine Parenting. Share it with someone else because it takes a village to raise our kids today. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all your news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.